We're talking today with Mr. Edmond Kaminski of Grand Rapids, Michigan. The interviewer is James Smither of Grand Valley State University. Mr. Kaminski, can you start by telling us a little bit about your own background? For instance, where were you born?
My name is Edmond Kaminski. I was born and raised on a farm between Wayland and Hilliard's, about halfway in between. It was a 40-acre farm. Mm-hmm. And we lived right next door to a school. And I remember first time I went to school, I couldn't speak English. Mm-hmm. And I went to there, and teachers asked me questions. I knew what they said, but I couldn't answer it in English.
Did you speak Polish at home?
Very little, very little. I understand it, though, yes.
But was it Polish that you spoke at home?
Yes,
yeah, okay.
Yes, it does.
Okay. And do you know when your family had come over from Poland?
No, my parents did not come from Poland.
Okay.
My mother or father did not come from. They all came from the area around Wayland and Hilliard's area. Mm-hmm. They're both Polish. And then we lived on that farm until I was in the fourth grade. From the fourth grade, my dad became sick. So he sold the farm, moved into Wayland. Mm-hmm. We lived there, approximately 2 years, and he worked at what they call a grist mill in Wayland, and he delivered things to the farm. They became sick again. Mm-hmm. So they sold the farm and moved back, while he was there, he became sick on the farm. And then we moved in town, and then he delivered things out the farm. That's when he got sick again. Mm-hmm. And then he sent them to Mayo Clinic, and they found out that he was allergic to livestock.
Oh, not good for a farmer.
Yes, that was the end of his farming, yes. We lived on that farm probably 3 or 4 more years, and we had what they call a sugar bush. That's where they make maple syrup. Mm-hmm. And Dad was sick, and he says, boys, I had 2 brothers, he said, go out and tap the maple trees. Well, we went out and tapped what we assumed were maple trees. And one Sunday, my uncle came over and says, go out and see what happened. Well, we tapped every white ash tree in the woods. Rather stupid. And then after that, I went to high school in Wayland. And I worked at the Ford garage after I graduated from high school.
Okay. And what year did you graduate? When did you graduate from high school?
1936. Okay. Wayland High School. And I went there 4 years, and then I went to the Ford garage, and then they sent me to the Ford Motor Company Mechanical School.
And where was that?
Right in Wayland. Okay. Right in Wayland. Only Ford dealership there. And thereafter, then you recall that they had people were drafted in World War II. Mm-hmm. Well, my number happened to come up with the last group to go in Allegan County. And I was drafted on January the 6th, 1942. And went to Fort Custer, Michigan, mm-hmm. for approximately 3 or 4 days. From there, they sent us to Fort Knox, Kentucky for basic training.
And what did basic training consist of for you?
At first, they started us driving Jeeps and trucks and half-tracks. And then we'd deliver groceries to the kitchens, things like that. Mm-hmm. And then they asked me what type I was doing, and I told them I was doing woodwork, and then they got me into driving a tank. Mm-hmm. Ever since then, and we drove a tank when we were at Fort Knox, Kentucky.
Okay. Now, at that point, so that's sort of the spring of 1942?
That was training, yes, basic training.
Yeah. Now, what kind of tank did you drive first?
First one I drove was it's one of the old type tanks. It had on the right side, it had a 75 millimeter gun, and the driver sat here.
And then there's a smaller turret on top of 37?
No, then a turret up on top with a 50 caliber machine gun on it.
Oh, did it have? Well, there was the
The driver.
Yeah, there was the Grant tank or the Lee tank that is 75, and then the 37 in the turret.
We got that later.
Okay, so this was an earlier one. So this would be a model that was not one that was used in combat.
Not used in combat. No,
it was just
that's what we trained.
Okay.
We did not get that until we went to Fort Benning, Georgia.
Okay, all right. So you're training in tanks at this point, and in the training tank, how many men were in the crew?
5.
Okay, and what did they do?
Well, there was a driver, assistant driver, tank commander, radio operator, and the gunner.
What did the assistant driver do?
He was on the right-hand side. He'd operated a 30 caliber machine gun. And we had escape hatches that go out on the driver's side. You could get out if you came into contact with something like that.
All right.
And then we all had earphones and intercom system with a radio. And we could listen to German music when we were over there.
Right.
Then after that, when we finished at Fort Knox, Kentucky, they sent us to Camp Bowie, Texas.
When was that?
It'd be in, I think it was March of 42.
Okay.
I do not have the exact date of that, but I think it was March, and
So
it was
you weren't,
in the middle of Texas.
Really at Fort Knox all that long then?
No, just 8 weeks. 8 weeks, and we had 2 gentlemen that were there from Benton Harbor, and they had their car in Fort Knox. And we'd have the weekend off, and they'd get in their car, and I would have came home on the weekend. Well, the last week we were there, I got a phone call real quick. My dad would meet us in Benton Harbor, and I'd go home, another 80 miles. I got a quick call that you're heading out. So we went back and got back in time to head for Camp Bowie in Texas.
All right. Now, what kind of place was Camp Bowie? What did that look like?
It was a rather new camp. There was no barracks. We all lived in tents, but the tents were built, had a wooden floor in it and wooden sides on it, had 5 bunks in it, and it had a gas stove in the middle. And then the rest of it was all tank. It was a tent on the outside. It was neat, clean, and warm because the nights got cold in the wintertime. Then we did a lot of training there too.
All right. Now,
more training.
Yeah. Now, when you were doing your training, whether at Fort Knox or at Camp Bowie, did you get the training of marching and drill and all of that kind of stuff?
Oh yes, we had that more so at Fort Knox.
Right.
Once a week we'd have it when we were in Camp Bowie, Texas, marching and doing that.
Okay. Now, did you also have weapons training?
Yes, we did.
And what were you trained on?
Rifles and machine guns, 30 caliber machine guns.
Now, when you're training to be in a tank crew, do they train you to do the different jobs on a tank?
You could do everything. You had to do everything, yes.
All right. Now, where in Texas was Camp Bowie?
Just about in the middle of Texas, halfway between it was near Brownwood, Texas. And they had a radio station there called KBWD. The reason they had that call letter is it was a dry county. It would keep Brownwood dry. And we were possibly 60 miles from Fort Worth and between Fort Worth and Dallas.
All right.
Are you familiar with that?
Now, about how long were you there?
We were there pretty close to a year. We did an awful lot of training there.
Okay. Now, at this point, were you organized into a regular unit? Or?
Regular unit. That's where our unit was organized. The cadre came there or started it there in the beginning. It was probably 2 years prior to the time that we arrived.
Right.
And our group went from Fort Knox and made up the rest of the battalion.
Okay, so the cadre had some officers and
officers were there already. And it consisted of headquarters company, maintenance company, A, B, C, D, different companies. Okay, so there was 5 tanks to each company.
5 to a company or 5 to a platoon?
5 to a company.
Okay.
A company, 5 tanks, B company, 5 tanks, and so on.
So you only had
headquarters and headquarters did all the paperwork, and the maintenance repaired the units.
Right. Okay. Now, let's see, was this the 760th Tank Battalion?
Yes, it was.
That was your unit?
That's
Okay.
that's the 760th Tank Battalion.
Now, were you still training at this point in the same kind of tank that you had earlier?
Yes, but more so well, they dig foxholes and things like that. Then after that, just primarily training. And then from there, we left to Fort Benning, Georgia by train. And we were then attached to the officers' training school. That would be the infantry officers' training school. And we would go with the infantry with them all the time, and they would dig trenches and try to stop a tank by putting metal or wood or something like that to stop it. And like as if you were going through, like you're going to make an attack with tanks and infantry in front of them, you know. And they tried to stop us, and they'd dig the hole, and we'd hit it and try to get out. And sometimes we were lucky to get out. It all depends.
Okay. Now, at this point, what kind of tank were you in?
We were in a regular tank that we got when we went into on our way overseas. We got those tanks that had a 75 millimeter gun on it in the front of it, then not on the side. It was right in front, a big gun on a turret. On a turret.
So you were in a Sherman at that point?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So you sort of skipped over using Lees or Grants or Stewarts, and you went directly into a Sherman then?
Yes, went to those units, yes. And then we trained with the officers. And every time we'd get the tanks to get dirty, well, the so-called officers had to clean the tanks. We did not have to, but we kept quite clean. Now, it had a 75 millimeter on it, had a 30 caliber gun that the driver, yeah. And then it had a 50 caliber up on the turret.
All right. Now, this is a little bit different. When you were in Texas and then you're in Georgia, you're down in the South and so forth. How were living conditions and things different down there than it was up in Michigan?
Well, it was warmer there because I left, in the wintertime. But the nights got cool, rather cool. Didn't see any snow, thank goodness. And a lot of lakes and rivers around. And we'd get a chance to go out on a little getaway from, for weekend and stuff and fix our meals there, like as if you're in a war or something like that.
Now, did you spend much time at all among the civilian population? Did you go off base?
No civilian. The only time it'd be when we were in Texas is, I know we had the weekends off, we'd go into Brownsville, Texas, where you could go to dances and things like that, meet the civilians then.
All right. Now, about how long were you in Fort Benning?
Boy, I don't, possibly pretty close to a year. Okay. Because I remember when I got to Fort Benning, I had my only furlough. And I got home on a furlough, and my girlfriend, her sister, they took my car, they took us back over there. And we take some of the officers in the tanks and let them ride up in the turret, where we'd have some rough going. One area we had was a 6 or 7 foot drop off, straight down. And if you did it right, you could do it just right. And we just happened to have a Chilean officer in the tank crew, and I evidently hit it too hard. And when we came back, we found out he had 3 cracked ribs because he hit.
Was he sort of sticking his head and shoulders out of the top of the turret?
Yes.
All right. So you had Chilean officers. So do you have any idea why they were there?
Yeah, they're just for training. They're foreigners,
Right.
Different type of foreigners over there.
Now, do you know at that point if they were allies or just?
They were all allies, yes. Okay. All allies.
Yes. Some good, because some of the South American countries were part of the alliance at that point, and some were not. So Chile was part of that.
And they had paratroopers there also took training in Fort Benning, Georgia. Then another time we had to cross a river. They had pontoons built, and one of our crew was one of them. They had three different tanks. They built a pontoon over the Chattahoochee River. It runs between Georgia and Alabama. And they started putting tanks 100 yards apart. And they brought them 80, 70, 60, 50. When we come to 40, my tank went down. But we were prepared to get out.
So they were just testing?
Life reserve, testing the pontoon, see what they would take. Yes.
So
that was a little scary.
All that. In general, how easy or hard was it to drive a tank compared to a truck or something like that?
Oh, it was, once you get used to it, you didn't mind it. You had the levers, to pull right and left. And the tank commander would tell you to go with the intercom, where to go. And we very seldom button up. We always, most of the time, open all the time. But if you button up, you had to, you could see out of it,
Right. So button up means to close all the hatches.
Close all the hatches.
That's how you would normally be in combat if there was going to be people shooting at you.
Sometimes. Yeah. All depends on how much small arms fire there was.
All right. Now, do you remember when it was then that you shipped out from Fort Benning?
Yes, I do have it. It was in just before Christmas of 42. Or 42 or 43, I forget what it was. We went there to Camp Pickett, Virginia. And we got on a boat there to Camp Pickett in Virginia and put our tanks over there.
And did you bring your tanks with you? Yes,
we brought tanks all the way over there on trains. And what they did with them then, I don't know, they put them on some other boat, evidently, come over there. But then from there, it took us quite a few days before we landed. We didn't know where we were going. They did everything. It was hush-hush. Finally, when we got halfway there, they told us we were going for Casablanca in Africa.
Okay. Now, I guess we do need to kind of make sure we have our years straight here. Now, were you going as part of the invasion force, or were you coming?
No, this is for replacement. The invasion was made probably 2-3 months prior to that.
Okay. So maybe then you were leaving at the end of 42, because the invasion was November of 42, as the original landings in Morocco and Algeria.
Yeah.
All right. And so that's around the time you're leaving the States, then you get there basically as reinforcements at that time.
Then saw all the ships that were sunk in the area, and we got off over there.
But what kind of ship did you sail on?
Big Liberty ship.
Okay.
It had a lot of people on it. People got sick when it got stormy.
Now, did it get stormy a lot?
Pardon?
Was it a bad trip over, or just one big storm?
Not too bad, no. Not too bad. No, not bad at all.
Okay. Now, were you traveling?
I was lucky I did not get sick.
Now, were you traveling in a convoy?
Yes, we were in a big, long convoy. And all you could see is ships all around, all over, every side, front, battleships, and the smaller ones going in and around. And they heard that there was a German submarine in the area. And our boat happened, something went wrong with the motor, and we lagged behind. And they kept 3 cruisers to guard us, until they fixed the motor up, and then we caught up with the rest of the group when we got into the Mediterranean Sea.
Okay. Now, where did you land then when you got to Africa?
Casablanca.
All right.
Casablanca. Okay. It's a big city, very big.
Okay, now that's actually on the Atlantic coast rather than the Mediterranean.
Yeah, Atlantic coast, yeah.
Okay. And aside from it being a big city, what did Morocco look like?
You mean Casablanca?
Yeah, Morocco
that
whole area, Casablanca,
well,
the area.
A lot of Arab people, and they had their long dresses and donkeys, and they'd sell you things, and when we got there, they told us not to eat the oranges, because you're supposed to wipe them, clean them, wash them, everything. But the oranges over there were huge, like grapefruits. But we didn't wash them, we just went ahead and ate them. They were very good.
Now, what was the weather like at the time you got there?
Warm and hot.
Okay, so it wasn't raining a lot or anything else like that?
No, it didn't rain at all. Very, very little at the time. But the evenings got very cold. And we stayed in Casablanca. We did military police duty. And while we were there, President Roosevelt and Churchill had their meeting there. And I was pulling MP duty. All the rest of them were too there. And I don't know if you saw it on TV or not, or at any time, but I was probably within 50 feet of the two of them.
All right.
Good view of them.
Now, what sort of impression did you have of these people once you saw them?
We thought it was great. See the president especially, and Churchill.
And did people know generally that Roosevelt needed a wheelchair to get around and that kind of thing?
You didn't see the wheelchair because he always sat. Never did see him walk or anything like that.
Okay. So even as the MP, you didn't see him move?
Never did see him move, not once, no.
Okay.
And then after we were through there, we had to wait till our tanks arrived, and that was probably 2 months, all of that. And then we moved from there to Port Leote and did MP duty there. We never did see any action in Africa.
Right, because by the time your tanks got there, it was pretty well over.
Pretty well over with, yes. We moved to Port Leote and stayed there probably a couple months, and we were right close to the Mediterranean Sea, and we'd go swimming every day. The undertow was really bad. You had to watch it because several soldiers drowned in there.
Well, that's still the Atlantic coast of
Is that,
Morocco.
would that be the Atlantic?
You're not quite up to the Straits of Gibraltar.
Oh, I see.
So if you're on the ocean, that would explain why the undertow
okay, yeah, I
was
remember
that
now,
bad.
yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And then we went from there into the cork forest. And what it is all cork trees where they make cork. They peel the cork off of the trees. And we did, like I said, we didn't see the action at all. We didn't do much maneuvering at all.
So how did you spend your time then?
Well, playing cards or doing something all the time. One time we had a track meet, and when I went to high school, I run 100 and 200, 220-yard dash, and I entered both units. I took first place in both of them.
Now, were you one of the older enlisted men in your unit?
Yes, I was.
Okay. So how did
There were a lot of younger ones there. There was, of course, the people that were there prior to me were older than I was. The officers were older too. And the non-coms, most of them were older. Some non-coms were brought up from the unit itself.
Now, what rank were you at the time?
At that time, I was a corporal.
Okay.
Then I got my last rank as a T4 sergeant.
And when did that happen?
I couldn't tell you that.
Was it while you were still in Africa, or was it?
Yes, while I was still in Africa, yes. Then I remained a T4 driver all the time.
Okay. Now, did they then keep you based in Morocco, or did they eventually move you to Algeria? Or?
No, I forgot to tell you, while we were there, they had a bunch of French tanks, or not tanks, the French big unit from France were over there, troopers were there. And they had some tanks made by Chrysler, and they weren't very good. So they took 2 men from each tank and went with these guys about 300, 400 miles in south of Africa and told them how to do that for about a 4-week period.
So they're probably going into some of the French colonies that were sort of in West Africa then, or Central Africa, or someplace like that.
Yeah, they were all French troops. And all of our tanks water tanks were filled with water. Well, when we wanted to go get a drink of water, 2 weeks later, we found out they were empty. They put wine in them. We had a rough time getting water.
Now, was this when you were trying to get
We
back?
were going over there to where we could train these boys with those tanks. Then we went back to where we started for in the cork forest. Then from there, the war had ended in Africa, and they shipped us to take off for Italy from, I forget the name of the town.
Did you say a lot of Tunisia or Algeria? Or?
Algeria, yeah.
So Oran maybe? Or?
Yeah, Oran, that's where we were at, Oran. we loaded our tanks over there, and we were supposed to have been on the invasion of Italy. And one of the motors from our tank craft went out on us, so we couldn't go with them. We had to turn around and come back, reload, and go back again. And that's when the river was really rough. And I don't know if I should say this. It's not very nice to say it, but this one gentleman was a colonel, and he was heaving over the side. And this one fellow from Kentucky was rather funny. And he says, hey, buddy, he patted him on the back. He says, feel anything hair in your throat, you know what that is. Okay. That was not nice to say, but it actually did happen. And then we landed in Italy on 20... I forget what it was. The exact date on it, but it was right at the beginning of the invasion of Italy. And then we landed in a big harbor there.
To Naples?
Naples, yes. We stayed in Naples quite a while, and we bivouacked in a university a lot, but stayed there quite a while.
Okay. What kind of condition was Naples in when you were there?
A lot of people begging for food. And everything like that, and things went like that. By the way, when we were in Africa, the Arabs would sell us eggs, and I should have mentioned this before, and we'd be sitting there by the fire burning gas to keep warm. Now it's $4.50 a gallon, and we'd break an egg, and it'll be all right, the next one would be full of feathers. It was overdone. So in order to get even with them, the cooks would make tea in great big containers like this, and then they'd save the tea leaves. And we'd take the tea leaves and put them on a tarp and dry them, and we'd sell those tea leaves to the Arabs.
Did you sell them as tea leaves?
Sell them used tea leaves.
Okay. They were all over too. Okay. Now, at what point did you actually get into action?
We first went up, see, I don't know if I have that down here on my list or not. No, I do not have that, but the first time we went up, we know when we were going to go up, we were up the front, and we parked in a group of 155 long toms. And it was at night, and they took off, and we thought it was incoming mail, you know. Everybody hid under the tank, was scared.
So the artillery started firing, and you thought it was the enemy's artillery?
We thought enemies throwing at us, yes. And then the next morning, we went into battle first time near the Rapido River.
Okay. Now, can you describe sort of what the physical circumstances of the battlefield were? I mean, or what was your unit trying to do at that point?
Well, they'd mix up. A company would go one area, B company would go another area with the 36th Infantry Division out of Texas. And we were with the 88th Infantry, 95th Infantry, 92nd Infantry. And we were with the Indian Gurkhas and the British troops and Australian troops, too.
Okay. So your battalion was essentially an independent tank battalion.
Independent company, yes.
And its assignment was basically to support infantry units. And that was what you trained to do back at Fort Benning and so forth, and now you're doing that.
And then we were also trained with the 1st Armored Division. And a lot of times when they make a big trade, they use us to make the first push. And then the 1st Armored would take over after we made the first push. So they use you for the first push because that way the 1st Armored doesn't lose any tanks? Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Now, what was the physical terrain like there when you get to
mountains? Very mountainous. All the way, all mountains all the way.
Now,
very big.
Doesn't that make it very hard to use tanks?
Yes, it does. And some of the trails, you'd go up the trails, half the track would be off, and And sometimes you couldn't use the tanks because it was bad, so that what we'd do is we'd dig a hole down and back the tank up, use it as artillery.
Okay. Now, when you were supporting infantry that was making an attack, what could you do to help them?
Well, they would tell us where to fire, all by contact, and we'd put, range the guns where to shoot at, and they'd tell us how many rounds to shoot per minute, and so on. And you could throw a lot of shells within a minute.
What kind of targets did you have?
Well, possibly Germans. We couldn't see what they were because
Were you using, were you shooting at tanks or at fortifications, or were you using?
Well, yeah, see, they also had little paper Cubs planes, and they were observing them over it. And they was the one to tell us where they were, and they'd radio back to someone, I don't know who, but then they'd give us the area to shoot. We'd go by number to tell you where to shoot and how far.
So you were probably doing a lot of indirect fire. You kind of
a lot of indirect fire.
Like the howitzers, you kind of shoot up the planes.
Yeah, or just over the top of the mountain. And shortly after that, they got a new shell on the 75 and the 105 millimeter. I had this first tank at first, and then they took us out of the 105, the regular tanks, and put us in it was an open top. I forget what they call it.
It was an M7 Priest?
Yeah, open top, had 105 millimeter on it. And it was a big shell, huge shell. It had 7 powder charges in it. The reason it had the 7 powder charges in is if you use 7 charges, you could probably throw that shell 5 miles. And then if you want to just shoot up over it, you just shoot up over the mountain. And then at that time, they made a shell with a it was built to make contact. What would you call it?
Well, there were several kinds of shells they had. There was an armor-piercing variety.
The armor-piercing, but this was the armor-piercing, we used that against tanks.
Right.
But they had a unit inside of it that would detect anything.
Okay, a proximity fuse?
What?
A proximity fuse?
Yeah.
It gets close to something.
It'd come close enough to take off. And then it'd come within 40 feet over the top, and it'd burst all of it. It was so sensitive. When we first tried them, if you shoot them all at one time, they get all the shells would go off at once. So we'd then go and shoot them one, in 2, 3, 4 second intervals.
Now, were these regular high explosive? Were they phosphorus?
High explosive.
Okay. So they weren't like white phosphorus or something like that?
You use white phosphorus, so we could, yes. Then we used the armor piercing. We didn't use any armor piercing on the big tank we had with 105. We did on the other ones. Then after that, the 75 was no mark at all for the German tanks. Then they made a 76 unit, and that would penetrate the German tanks.
Right. Now, did you serve on Shermans that had the 76, or did you stay with the?
I know I was with 76 at first, yes, at first, and then they added this company to it. They had one from each company. There was six tanks like that we had of those, and they primarily used us at first for artillery.
Right. So that was a safer job than.
Safer job, yes.
Okay. Now, were you encountering many German tanks in Italy?
Yes, we do. We counted German tanks. Yes, we did put out 3 of them that I know of. Well, before that, we were on our way to the front lines, and my tank happened to hit a double landmine. And I showed you a picture before. It's a paid Life magazine, and knocked the whole track. We couldn't use it anymore. We had to wait for another replacement.
Okay. Now, was it common to run into mines and things like that? Did that happen a lot?
There were a lot of mines all over, but they had companies that would detect the mines. And we had a couple of people in our company go ahead and detect them, but we weren't very good at that. But the regular people that did that did a very good job of it.
Right. Now, what kind of losses was your unit taking? I mean, if you're going in and you're fighting the Germans there, end of 43, early 44.
Yes, quite a few casualties. We had, I don't know, in my company, not in my company at first, I know of it, there was 7 of people that were killed, but there were later on in the tank, there was more battle you got. If you tank against tank, when we got an area where you could do that tank against tank. Then shortly thereafter, we went into Cassino, and we were Mount Portia and Mount Chocchio, between the two of them. And we were sitting there and just like ducks, anybody could come over and shoot us because they then after the war, we got up, when we went back on a look, about 12 years ago, and you could see everything from up there on top of the at Cassino of the big monastery.
Now, did you actually use your tanks to try to attack at Cassino, or did you stay back and provide support?
No, we used artillery. They first air raided it. The big bombers hit it day and night, and then smaller bombers, and then the artillery did it, and they all quit. And then everything was quiet, and then they came out because they were all protected. So it didn't do much good.
Okay. So were you participating in the bombardment against the actual abbey on the top of the mountain then?
Yeah, well, wherever they told us to shoot, we would, yes.
Yeah. Well, for a long time, they didn't shoot at the abbey way up at the top. Yeah. But eventually, they thought maybe the Germans were using it, and so then
they probably did, yes.
They did that too.
And then we also went up back then from the backside. We used our tanks then for actual fire. Get up, shoot at other tanks too at that time. We were lucky that none of us were hurt, and we never got hit by any shells or anything. But
so did you maneuver around the Germans?
You move around, yes. You'd move around. Your tank commander was pretty good. Our tank was good. He was telling you where to go, what to shoot, and what not to, back up, forward, or something like that.
Well, when you were doing that, when you were getting into tank-on-tank combat, then were you in a regular Sherman tank at that point?
No, this is an open tank.
Oh, you're doing that?
This is an open tank, yes.
And were you shooting directly at German tanks?
Yes, we were shooting directly at them, yes.
Well, that was kind of dangerous, wasn't it?
Yes, it was dangerous.
Because those tanks were not really designed to fight.
No, not designed for that, no. They're primarily for artillery.
But they had a big gun, so...
Yeah, we had a big gun, and it worked. It was armor-piercing. Excuse me. One advantage we had over the Germans, our shells would go in and burst, and the German shells would either go in or out or play tag with you inside. You know what I mean?
Not exactly.
The shell would bounce around inside.
Wasn't that still pretty dangerous?
Yes, it was. No, that was dangerous, yes.
Okay. Now you said that a German shell might go right through the tank. Is that because their shell was so high-powered?
Yeah, high-powered. They were 88 military, that was a powerful tank, one of the best there ever was. They used it for anti-aircraft and everything else.
And it was also, big one. Yeah, and it was the main gun, the Tiger tank.
Yeah, Tiger tank, yeah.
They did all of that.
It was hard to knock those Tiger tanks out because they were you had to be pretty close to them.
Were the Germans... Probably they wouldn't have had too many Tigers, really that kind of. They'd have had Mark IVs. And then they also, were they using assault guns? That's the kind of tank.
They had assault guns, yes.
Gun right in the hull.
Yeah, they had anything you can imagine, just like we did over there. And you could see whatever was knocked down. If you go by, you could pick it up. And we were fortunate then to long time. Of course, in the meantime, they invaded Anzio. And so when we was doing this, Anzio was being invaded, and luckily we didn't have to go over there.
Right.
We were mostly along, not too far off from the west shore. And we'd probably go 35 miles inland or 40 or something like that.
All right. Now, where was your unit, do you know, at the point when Cassino finally fell? Because it's well into the spring of 44 before Cassino actually gets
44,
taken.
yeah.
Had you maneuvered around behind it by then, or were you?
Yeah, we were moving behind it, yes. And then after it fell, then we moved back and took a little break, for about a month break. And then we headed for Rome, and we captured Rome.
Now, was your battalion involved in the first entry into Rome, or did you follow later?
I couldn't say, but some of the A Company and B Company were, yes, but they held us back with our tank, with the tank that we had.
Okay.
But
Now,
we did go into Rome and celebrated very much.
all right, so what was that like? What happened to you there?
Just wonderful, just wonderful. People greeted you and hugged you and kissed you and get anything you wanted. And we got to see the Pope, had an audience with the Pope.
How did you manage that?
The company commander of ours happened to do it, take care of it for us.
Mm-hmm.
And it was probably 300 of us people there. And he gave us a nice talk and shook hands with him. Mm-hmm. He blessed everyone.
And did he speak English?
Yes, he spoke very good English, yes. Mm-hmm.
And did you have the impression that he was happy that you had shown up?
Yes, he was. Yes, he was. The people in Rome were very happy for that, too.
All right. Now, did you stay in Rome or did you move through pretty quickly?
No, we moved back possibly 15 to 20 miles, a place called Lake Bracciano,
mm-hmm.
Great big lake. It was an open area, and the lake was very deep, mm-hmm. and there was a lot of big whitefish in it. Big fish, which we tried to catch them, we couldn't do it. So what they finally did do is go out in a boat, borrow a boat from the people, and take a hand grenade and drop it, and bring up the fish. And we had fresh fish. And we stayed there for 3 weeks.
Okay. And were you just kind of resting and refitting at that point, or?
Pardon?
Were you kind of refitting and taking replacements?
Yes. The other replacements come in and took over from us. And then, of course, you had to train the replacements, too, of what to do.
Mm-hmm. Now,
that was fun.
Now, did your tank crew remain the same? You know, the same group of guys together?
Yes, same group of guys on this type here. It was all the way through the same thing. And I was the only one that was injured. Mm-hmm. But this was after Rome, mm-hmm. in Santa Maria. It was up in the mountains, up in the top, and we weren't buttoned up. And a shell came from someplace, I don't know where it came from, but it hit the tube of the gun, mm-hmm. glanced the tube of the gun, and we had goggles on, and it hit me right between the eyes. There's a scar there. It broke my goggles right in half.
So a piece of shrapnel?
A piece of shrapnel. It ricocheted off of the tube of the gun and hit me right here, in between here, where I got my Purple Heart.
That was a pretty close call, man.
Yes, you got extra 5 points to get out of service that much quicker.
Well, let's kind of
I went back to the medics, and they put some stitches in it. Probably gone 6-7 hours, then came back to the company again.
So you didn't even get a good break then?
No.
No. All right.
No.
Now, let's kind of follow your movements here a little bit. You're in Rome, and then you're refitting at Lake Bracciano. Mm-hmm. And then after Lake Bracciano, what did you do next?
Then we went on up to, more areas all the time, but at night, we'd stop and they'd tell us to just shoot anywhere. Just put a shell in a gun and aim it someplace a long distance away, just for harassment. Mm-hmm. And we did quite a bit of that. And by the way, I forgot to tell you, when we made the big push to Rome, mm-hmm. we had an awful lot of artillery, mm-hmm. and a lot of aircraft. And we were in 105 millimeter, we were putting through 32 shells a minute. Mm-hmm. So that was really throwing a lot of shells out there at that time. And those were big ones, too.
Now, if you were firing rapidly like that, was there a point where you had to stop and let the gun cool down or clean it? Or?
Yes, you had to cool it down, yes. Mm-hmm. And once in a while, we'd take it was noisy, take a sea can from food, mm-hmm. and put it on the end of the shell. And then when it comes out, it makes the darndest noise you ever heard of. It's like screaming Mimi. Well, the Germans did have a screaming Mimi around Cassino. Mm-hmm. And I never heard anything like it. It was a sort of a concussion shell. And if you get close enough, concussion was that bad, it would kill you. But it sounded like a bunch of lions and horses and just having one heck of a big fight. And never heard anything like it. Yeah. They called it a screaming Mimi.
Yeah, the Naples River was the name of it. It was a multi-tube rocket launcher.
and they'd bring it in a tunnel, and they'd bring it out. And then they took one company of ours, I forget, A or B company, and they laid down a barrage, and they loaded this tank full of phosphorus shells. And they took this tank as close as they could get to it, just all phosphorus shells in there. And that thing never came out again.
Yeah. And a phosphorus shell will spray
burn.
White phosphorus, but it just burns anything it comes in contact with. So if you get it anywhere in the area of the crew or the gun or anything else,
that's right.
A good way to get them to go somewhere else.
They probably put 150 shells because that's all they loaded on that thing. They had it on the back and everything. And that one tank, and they never got hit, and they were lucky to get out of it too.
Yeah. All right.
Almost direct contact with firing it.
Okay. Now, when you were going north of Rome, now, were you in hill country again, or were you close to the coast?
North of Rome, yeah.
And were you in hills? And that kind
I had a good friend of mine. He's from Belding. Not Belding, but there's a Catholic church on West River Road, a little bitty town there. It's Irish country. And Jim Heather, he was in Cassino at the time, and they were buttoned up. And German 88 was probably 50, 60 yards away from him, and it hit the side of it, went out to on transmission, got the next tank to it with one shot, and never got a scratch. He came to my wedding, I went to his wedding after the war.
Very good. Okay. Now, if we're kind of getting into the sort of the later part of 1944, you're north of Rome and so forth, did you have another German fortified line to deal with? Was it kind of like Cassino again?
Oh yes. It was in smaller towns, and because they just after they Anzio, then they joined together. You know, the Germans did join together. We joined together too, and just kept after them all that time. And we went into Florence and stayed there quite a while. And then we went into Leaning Tower of Pisa, and that's see that thing leaning sideways. It's altogether different, and it's really you couldn't believe it. You heard about it, you know, when you get to see it, boy, that was really something to see. Very interesting. Yeah. And then towards the end of the war, I say the last 30 days of it, you'd see awful lot of Germans being prisoners were brought back. A lot of young people.
Yeah. So in general, what do those prisoners look like? You mentioned a lot of them were very young.
Most of them were young, yes. But you could tell if there was what would they call that high, big officers of the German war, the tough ones.
Oh, the SS?
SS, yeah. They were sturdy. They wouldn't smile. They wouldn't do anything. They'd do anything to try to get away from you. They really had to watch those guys because they'd do anything to get by.
But the regular German soldiers that you saw?
They were very, very happy to see them go and take them in as prisoners. Okay. A lot of prisoners.
And were there older men as well as young boys, or mostly just kids?
Mostly the kids, yes.
Now, in general, if you're kind of describing what your unit was doing after you moved north of Rome and then kind of through the winter of 44, 45, did you stay in one place a lot? Did you move a lot?
Well, we moved a lot. We were at the Cinquale Canal. You've heard of that? There was a canal there, and there was another German line there. And that was one of the last big ones, Cinquale Canal. I can't spell it, but...
And was this sort of toward the Po Valley?
It was right along the ocean front.
Okay.
And it was also near the big port city, because right nearby was a marble mines. The marble mines are way up in the mountains, and they're huge marble mines. And after the war, about 12 years ago, we went back and saw all of that stuff.
But then was it the big port? Was it Genoa on the west coast, or was it Venice?
No, it was this side of Genoa. This side of Genoa. Because we just about ended up in Genoa when the war was over with. But then we hit the Po Valley, and there wasn't much fighting over there. It just looking out and firing at whatever you could see or anything like that.
What do you think the most dangerous phase of the Italian campaign was for you?
The what?
Well, what do you think the most dangerous phase of the campaign was?
Cassino.
Back at Cassino.
Monte Cassino, yes, it was the worst. And that Cinquale Canal was really rough too.
Okay. Now, what was it about the
And then
Cinquale Canal that made
the first fight we went to Rapido River.
Mm-hmm.
There was an awful lot of infantrymen lost.
Mm-hmm.
It looked like as if the river was almost red for blood.
Right.
That many people were killed.
Because that was a river crossing in very bad weather conditions,
Yes.
flood, and a lot of problems like that.
They'd let them build their pontoons, and then they'd open up on them every time.
Now, what did your unit do at the Rapido? Did you follow the infantry, or?
Yes, we followed the infantry after they took it over. And then we were with shortly after Rapido, we were with the 92nd Infantry Division. They were mostly all black.
That was a black unit, yes.
Black unit, yes. And their commander was white. And we took this one town, and all of the infantrymen deserted us. And here we were sitting with nobody around us. And that day we had to abandon our tanks. Mine did. I didn't have to abandon my tank. But then,
why would you have had to abandon your tanks?
Because the Germans are coming after us. We had to get out of there.
And it was
we
safer to
couldn't
do
go
that on
quick
foot?
enough. Yeah.
Well,
And
why didn't you have to abandon your tank?
Because I had kept going and got out of the way. Turn around. They told us turn around and go back. Get out of it as quick as you can. Very fortunate. That lasted probably a good half hour to get out of their range because it was just infantrymen. There was no other tanks following them. And then a week later, we went back and got the tanks back again. Made another one.
So the Germans didn't take the tanks away then?
No, they didn't destroy them or anything like that. But they did abandon us. They just took off. They dropped their guns and they left.
Yeah. Well, the 92nd was not very well trained or
No,
led at that point.
they weren't very well trained.
There were other black units.
Yeah,
that were a lot better.
I did see a 92nd Infantry Division where they had I think it was a 75 gun. It was on wheels, And at that time, you could send a shell from 10 seconds to 29 seconds before it would go off. And evidently, they didn't set it right. It come out of the gun, it went off right in front of them and killed the whole crew. Just like that.
Yeah, well, that's a pretty good sign. They didn't get a whole lot of training before they went.
Yes.
Yeah.
But before we got these radar, that's what we call our radar shells. Before we had to cut all the fuses on every one of them, just to a certain amount of seconds. Little tool you use to bring it to seconds to follow the numbers.
Right. So the idea, that's for the high explosive shells then. So you want
high explosive shells,
to explode above a
But
target.
the armor-piercing shells, why, they were just armor-piercing.
That was on contact. Yeah.
Yes, they were on contact, yes.
Right.
Go in and burst.
Okay. Now, tell me a little bit more about the Cinquale Canal. I mean, what was the situation there when you got to it?
Well, it was possibly half a mile wide, and water running through there as well. There's a big sign up there, it says, and it was very well protected too. And it was near the water. That's when the tankers really, tank for tank, fought over there, and both sides lost a lot of men. Our company did too, but of course I was not there with ours. They just used me as artillery. So.
But that was a place then where you were encountering enemy armor and they were trying to defend the crossing.
Armor against armor, yes.
Now, in situations like that, were you getting air support too? I mean, were there...
Oh yes, there was air support, lots of times, most of the time. But what helped us a lot was those little Cub planes that tell us where the people were.
Yeah,
where
Piper Cubs were the artillery observers, right?
Artillery, they use them. And you'd see them, they shooting at you, you'd see them diving back and forth, get away from it, Oh, before I forget you, when we were at Cassino, our tanks were all in this between these two mountains, Mount Trocchio and Portia. Here come a German plane right over us and looking down like this. And the tank in front of me, his name was from Ionia, Bernie Travis. He just happened to be in the turret at the time. He had a 50 caliber, and he followed him. He got him, and he went right in the side of a mountain. And gee, that guy was down looking. You could see him looking at us. The pilot was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, did you see much in the way of German aircraft, or was that about it?
No, we didn't see that much of it, no, because they, like our planes, would one right after another. Well, German planes would start that, and then they'd scatter when the resistance, when they start throwing shells up at them. Aircraft shares,
Yeah. So you didn't have too much trouble then from German aircraft?
No, we didn't have too much trouble at all.
Now, are there other aspects of what your unit did in Italy that we haven't covered yet?
Like what?
I'm asking you. I guess because we've dealt with kind of
with the people?
Well,
yes, the people were happy to see us. Yes, and when the Germans would leave, they asked people where Dovi Tedeschi, where the Germans were going, and they took apart the Viet. I mean, they took off, but they raised their own chickens, and they didn't leave them very many of them, because they took them off. So, and one time we were almost out of food, and we happened. One of the guys in another company killed the beef, and we cooked that thing up. Cooks did that too, so we had some fresh meat, and we'd get it now and then. If you're pretty good at it with a Tommy gun, put it on signal fire instead of automatic. You hit a chicken in the head. Otherwise, you just tear it all up.
What did the local population think?
They didn't like that.
No, probably not.
No, they didn't like that. We did do that too often.
Okay. Did you share the beef with them?
Pardon? Yes, we did. Yes, we did. We shared the beef with them.
Okay. Now, were there times when you were camped in one place for several weeks at a time, or a longer period of time there? And when you did that, did you get to see much of the local population?
Yes, we did see quite a bit of local content. What they did is they had a lot of wine cellars, and some of them were above ground, some were below ground. And this one gentleman, he had a whole bunch of them down. We didn't get underground, but we knew that he had some above ground. Excuse me. And one of my buddies had a 45 on him, and he put it through it, and the wine came out. Had a lot of wine.
All right.
And then they'd take you in too, and when we were out of there, if we'd go into town, they'd come and feed you, give you food, and a lot of pasta, and wine always, and they treated us like we were kings. No complaints whatsoever. Just happy to see them.
And could you do anything for them in return? I mean, share food or cigarettes or anything else like that?
No, the kids would give them candy and stuff like that, and they always liked to see that. We always carried some extra stuff for them.
All right. Now we get then down toward the end of the war. You're going into the Po Valley
yes.
in April and then beginning of May. And where were you at the point when the Germans surrendered?
Just outside of Genoa, when they surrendered. Okay. Just outside of Genoa.
And then when the news came that the Germans surrendered, what happened next?
Well, we waited possibly 2 weeks when they told us where to go. All of us went to go, and everyone had a certain area to go, and they line up their tanks and get all their gear out together and demonstrate it to the generals, and they'd inspect us on, and then they'd take the equipment away from us. Of course, in here we were waiting until us to go home. And that so happened on September, I've got the date over here, September the 9th of 45.
Okay. Now
when we left for home.
Now before that, was there any talk of having to go to Japan or anything like that? Or did you have enough points by then?
I had enough points. I had 88 points. The people that didn't had to go other places. Most of us that were left had enough points to go back home.
At least with your crew, if you had stayed together the
Our
whole time.
whole crew was all together. Yes, they all went home. There was from They was from Tennessee, Texas, a tank commander was from Texas. And he always played his guitar. And when we took his big barrage out of Rome when we were going to go, he left his guitar out in front. When we got all through front, there was nothing left of it. Just some concussion, just burst the tank, broke it all to pieces.
Did he get a new one?
Yes, he got a new one.
Okay.
Yes, he wouldn't be without one.
All right. Now, do you remember what kind of ship you took to get home?
Pardon?
Do you remember what kind of ship you took when you went home? Was it another?
Yeah, we went by. There's a name for that boat. I forget what it is, but it took us about 2 weeks to get across. We play cards.
Was it just a troop ship or an ocean liner?
Troop, no, troop trip, regular troop trip. All the way home. Ended up in discharge over there.
Okay. Now, when you finally got home, then what did you do?
Well, they discharged us, and I waited to get a bus ride from Virginia back to Grand Rapids, Michigan, and that took about 4 days. And I landed in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and I called my girlfriend up, my wife now, and she met me at the train station. That was really nice.
How long after that was it that you got married?
November the 15th, 1945.
Okay, so you didn't wait too long.
Didn't wait too long, no.
Right. And what kind of work did you go into?
Well, when I came out, I worked at the bus company for a while. It's the bus company. My brother-in-law was a head foreman over there, and I worked for them under there. And then they went on strike, and they wanted me to work Sundays and holidays, and I packed up my tools and left. And then I went to a insurance school. I joined an insurance company. I retired from an insurance company I was with them for 24 years.
Now, let's back up a little bit. I think one thing that you mentioned before we started the interview was that at some point or other you got to see General Patton.
Yes.
Can you tell us about that?
Well, that was in Casablanca. And one of the gentlemen was out on a platoon or something, and he came back, and he really chewed him out because he didn't salute him. And I was on MP duty at that time, and I saluted him like that, and this guy didn't salute him. He was a staff sergeant. He really chewed him out real bad. And he said, "Now look at that gentleman over there." He pointed at me. He says, "That's the way you should do it." And he come over, shook my hand, and those double pistols on his side, pearl handle revolver on his side, and I understood that they said that there's no place that he would send anybody where he would not go, but there wasn't any place that he wouldn't go.
Now, did you ever attend any of the speeches that he made or anything like that?
No, I did not hear any of the speeches he made, no.
Because he did a lot more of that probably in England before D-Day, but that's not where you were. So.
But I know he did say one time to somebody that in Africa, a lot of the tank commanders were getting killed. And his exact words were, a lot of tank commanders are getting killed because they think they were on their wedding day. The heads are out the turret like on wedding day. And that was his famous saying.
Right. Although from your description of things, it sounds like most of the time the tank commanders' heads were out of the turret anyway.
Most of the time.
Well, how hard was it to actually run the tank and use it effectively if you were buttoned up?
Well, they would be buttoned up too, but not all the time. He'd be out a little bit lower, because he used his binoculars and looked around. They had to, otherwise, looking out of this little hole, you couldn't see it. And it went, you'd see down here, it'd go up, and the mirror would come out over here. And
now, if you were buttoned up, how could you communicate with the infantry supporting you?
The tank commander would tell you where to go.
And how would the tank commander know?
Microphone.
Okay. But then how...
He has a throat mic, Everybody had a throat mic.
Right. But how would he know what to do or where to go?
That's a good question.
Okay. Well, at a certain point in the war, some of the tanks had a telephone attached to the back.
That what?
It had a telephone attached to the back of the tank.
Yeah.
And the infantryman could then talk to the tank commander.
Well, that's true. You are true there. I remember that now. That's okay. When you mentioned that, I forgot about that. About the infantry telling them where to go, where they were, and where to lay down the barrage,
Right.
so they could continue on.
But it was still a whole lot easier to look out the top of the tank.
Yes, it was. You could see more. Yes.
Right. All right.
And then after the war, there was, I showed you a picture of it. We went back to Italy. Mm-hmm. There was about 14 of us, the wives and everything, went back over there. We landed in Rome, and we took a tour all the way from the southern part of Italy, clear south, and went to the Mount Vesuvius. Mm-hmm. Is that it?
Yep.
And they had it showed people over there with dogs running, and it's still in a position, you know. Right. People like that, mothers holding babies, mm-hmm. things like that. That was, we saw that when we were during the war. We saw all that first, mm-hmm. but some of that stuff is gone now. Mm-hmm. They took it away, put it someplace else. And then where the wagons went, there was just 2 rows for the wheels to go because it was worn down from stone. Mm-hmm. And they sold a lot of cameos over there too. Well, when I was over there during the war, I probably bought, I think I paid $60 for a lot of cameos. Somebody stole them from me. Mm-hmm. It'd be worth a lot more money back here.
I like that.
Yes. And that's the area where they sold a lot of cameos. And that city was pretty nice to see. Mm-hmm. And it was big too.
Okay. Now, when you were taking your tour then, did you get back up to the casino area too?
No, yeah, we went back to the casino, mm-hmm. and we went up on top. Mm-hmm. You could see, by the way, when we were there, I forgot to tell you, we were with the Japanese-American boys, 442nd mm-hmm. Infantry. They were good. Mm-hmm. They fought with us over here. And when we were at Cassino, they were on our tour, you know, when we went, mm-hmm. they were getting a citation from the Italian people. Mm-hmm. And I got a picture in there of a couple of those guys that were getting citations from it at the same hotel that we were at. Mm-hmm. And that was quite a visit with those boys. Mm-hmm. And boy, they were good. Okay. And the German Gurkhas were good too.
Oh, British?
No, they could sneak up on you wouldn't even know it. They're that quiet because they'd feel your helmet. Mm-hmm. Our helmet was round. If you're German, they'd slit your throat.
Now, the Gurkhas were British soldiers from Nepal mostly. Mm-hmm. And then did you encounter any of the French North African soldiers?
No. No, we did not.
Didn't see those? Mm-hmm. All right.
Well, the Gurkhas, they brought their women with them. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And they were good fighters, very, very quiet. They could sneak up on anybody. Mm-hmm. Same way the Japanese Americans were very good at it. Mm-hmm. Because they're the ones that I would say of the infantry, the ones that took Cassino. Really. They did the dirty work, as far as I can see. Mm-hmm. Then, like going back to Italy, we went all the way from one end of town to the other, and then we went to the American cemetery near Anzio, mm-hmm. and everybody was walking through it, and I happened to run across the grave of John, his name is John Casey. His grave was there. He was from another company. Mm-hmm. Everybody come over there running, taking pictures of him. And then after that, we went and found a big German cemetery. Mm-hmm. And the cemeteries were really well built. You know, they had the tanks and everything over there. And a lot of young Polish people. My name is Kaminski. I saw 2 of them with 2 Polish kids with the name Kaminski. My wife is Malinowski. Mm-hmm. And we saw 3 names of Malinowski on it. They're only 15 years old. They fought for the Germans. Yeah.
Of course, it was also Polish troops who actually took the summit of Cassino itself.
Yeah. The Polish people have a grave up there mm-hmm. for the Polish troops up on top of the Cassino. When you mentioned that, I happened to go through that too.
Now, when you were actually there in that campaign, did you know that there were Polish troops there with you, or did you just learn that later?
No, we learned that later after the war, yeah. And it was a nice trip that we had back there. They ended up in Switzerland. And now I'm married, my wife, we have 3 children. 1 great-grandchild, and another one on the way.
Well, Very good. Well, thank you for taking the time to talk with us
It's
today.
been a pleasure. Thank you very much.